So hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar, which is substantiating claims for pet care products. So obviously, particularly today, we're going to be looking at pet care. This is a huge market. It ranges from things like grooming products to pet food and treats and things like that. So I'm really going to give an overview today about what kind of claims you might want to substantiate about pet care products, really focusing on marketing claims. How you substantiate those, what kind of regulations are involved, and also thinking about other reasons we might test pet care. It's one of those things that we actually test quite a lot at Ayton Global Research, but it's not necessarily something that people would relate us with because people don't often think why you would want to test a pet care product. So it's thinking about that, especially if you're involved in kind of product development for that industry. So just to give you a summary of the agenda, we'll look at an overview of the pet care industry, just to think about where we're kind of fitting in and what kind of products are there, what kind of trends we're seeing, things like that. The global regulations for advertising, so generally advertising products. Regulations for pet care advertising in particular. Is there anything we need to be thinking of when we're thinking of pets? Consumer research. So when we're thinking about substantiating those claims or testing those products, the particular type of research that's involved that we conduct. And then also share a case study of a pet care product that we've done, just so you can see how we would choose the appropriate design and methodology for that. So for those of you who don't know me, I am the Regulatory Director at Ayton Global Research. So I've been at the company about 8 years now. So I've obviously tested a lot of different types of products, including pet care. And it's one of those things that I really got involved in actually quite early on because it's something that we hadn't tested a lot of. So we're really thinking about how we can make the best study designs and questionnaire designs to really review these products at their best, because obviously it's a really different product to review compared to anything else, where we're looking at people testing it and giving us their opinions. We're obviously looking at people giving their own opinions about these products, but also thinking about their pets review, which is also great fun to do tests for. But yes, it's really thinking about how can you determine whether a pet is enjoying a product as well as the consumer themselves. So it's something I've really enjoyed being involved in as well. But basically, I'm a specialist in regulations that affect FMCG categories, so including pet care. Anything that we test, basically, that's what I'm interested in. But also our kind of processes, any regulations that mean that we're providing the best compliant data for you, for your purposes of using the research. So to kind of get us started, let's think about the pet care market. So I've taken a little couple of kind of excerpts from market research, just about a kind of global view of this industry. So we obviously, it's a huge industry. It's over $232 billion, and it's projected to expand at a 6.1% CAGR, which is actually really big when you're thinking about lots of FMCG industries. It's usually around the 4% mark. So actually, compared to some other ones, I did think that was quite a large growth. So it's definitely a growing industry. I thought that Global Market Insights did this really nice diagram in that article, and it also talks about where the kind of market is. So the US market obviously dominates North America. There's no surprises there. And the UK is dominating the European market, which is really interesting. Obviously, you can see the difference in the billions of dollars that are spent in both territories. So the US is obviously a huge market for pet care. That's very clear. What was interesting as well from Mintel, and this was particularly for the UK, but I think it does have a good idea of kind of the Western countries and how we're looking at product development. So packaging has been put in the spotlight, especially for pet food in particular. So people are putting attention towards green credentials for pet care. So things about being sustainable and about being recyclable, things like that. I don't know if you've got pets. I certainly do. Some packaging is really recyclable, but there's still a lot of packaging for pet food that isn't. So sometimes I pick up a brand not realizing and then realize I can't recycle the cat pouches or something like that. So it's really where people are looking at their MPD. So yeah, we want to make sure they've got eco-friendly packaging kind of going on in there. So it's a good thing just to think about in terms of trends. If you're looking at developing a pet care product, maybe thinking about it being sustainable is quite important at the moment. So we also want to talk about COVID-19 because obviously this is something that we are now like a year into. We're all still working from home. It's hopefully getting better. There's a rollout of vaccines, but there's certainly been an impact, and there certainly will be a lasting impact. And so it's really important to think about that when we're thinking about market trends as well. So Mintel have done a really good report actually, which is just about the impact of COVID-19 on the pet care industry. So that's quite a helpful thing. And I've just pulled out a couple of bits from that. So obviously at the beginning, people were stockpiling pet food. So there was a huge kind of rise, a big peak in pet food being demanded. But obviously it's not necessarily going to be a thing long term. The people working from home though, they have seen that they've got more kind of pet care being needed, kind of more investment in pet care because you're with them all the time, you're seeing them, you want to kind of make sure they're happy. So there is certainly kind of be like a stabilization there. What was interesting as well is that people thought they're going to kind of have where there's been an economic downturn, they may be spending less money on pet food, so less luxury products, more economical, basic things. So that's something where people can see they can save money straight away. So it could mean that if you're a private label manufacturer, this is where you're thinking about going for sort of budget pet foods and stuff like that. They've also sort of thought that there was like this peak in people purchasing pets because of lockdown. We saw a lot of sort of adverts for that as well about, people saying puppies for not, for life, not just for COVID, use kind of that classic term. But yeah, so there has been a spike, but now again, because people have got less money, people are less likely to be looking at buying pets because they're obviously a kind of long-term investment. They can cost quite a lot of money. So yeah, it could be something that we see kind of go down as well. So basically the point is there's been a huge spike in pet care, which you may now see turn down. It's something to have a look at, and certainly not the time to be thinking about luxury pet products necessarily, unless you're looking at a niche market. But for the kind of general population, it could be going economical. So now kind of looked at that kind of overall markets, I really want to talk about how we are regulating adverts. So to start off quite broadly, I want to think about how ads are regulated generally kind of worldwide with some exceptions, just to kind of have that in mind. So it doesn't matter essentially if it's a pet food, it's a pet toy, if it's a pet bed or grooming product, they will all be regulated by advertising standards. I think that's kind of the really important thing I need to bring up here. So I'm sure if you watched my webinars before, I've talked a lot about ad self-regulation, but if you haven't, I really want to summarize what this is. So as I said, this is kind of a global thing. There are the odd country that have federal agencies that are doing ad regulation, but generally it is self-regulated. What does this mean? It means that instead of every single advert getting put on the market being reviewed by a kind of authority and them saying, yeah, sure, you can use that advert, that would be a crazy amount of work. It's up to the industry to regulate themselves. So if I use the UK for an example, we have the Advertising Standards Authority in the UK. They have a code. So basically all the rules that you need to abide to make sure your adverts are compliant. And it's up to you as an advertiser, or actually any three parts of this industry, which is the advertisers who pay for the advertising, the advertising agency is responsible for its form and content, and the media that carry it. If you are any part of that, it's up to you to know what the code is of the advertising authority in the country that you're displaying your advert, and to follow their rules essentially. What happens if you don't? Well, it kind of again goes by country to country, but generally it's all working on a complaints basis. So your consumers or your competitors can complain about your product to that authority, and they will launch an investigation, basically to make sure if you've got anything that means your advert's being misleading. So things like a lack of evidence, which is obviously what I talk about a lot because that's what we provide. But generally that's what we're looking at. They do also do kind of general investigations. Certainly it happens a lot if you had, for example, I don't know, if there was a pet food kind of scandal, and we found out that loads of people are saying the same kind of claim about their product, but who's got it substantiated? That's when someone like the Advertising Standards Authority would launch an investigation, do a blanket wide search of all products, kind of like a watchdog, and see what's going on there. But yeah, otherwise it's all a kind of, it's all on a complaints basis. But generally basically, it's here to make sure that adverts are legal, decent, honest, and truthful. It means that as a consumer, you're not getting lied to. You're purchasing the product that you want, and that it does the effects that you want it to do. And as a competitor, it means you've got a level playing field. So you can't just say what you want about a product and everyone, says the same thing. It's making sure we've all got kind of a level playing field out there. A couple of helpful resources if you're not sure what the advertising authorities are in your country, or where you're advertising. A couple of kind of starting points. So there's the International Chamber of Commerce, and they have a self-regulatory framework which countries can adopt. So I've put the kind of link for their website there. So that looks at the framework and as I said, there's about 52 countries that have adopted it, which means they're all kind of abiding that same code of conduct because they're kind of looking at that framework. So, and things like the complaints basis and stuff like that. So that's a really good starting point to see who's adopted that. There's also the International Council of Advertising Self-Regulation, and that's ICAS for short. So they also have a council of lots of different self-regulatory organizations across the world, and they kind of come together, have some shared thoughts, put some shared news out there. But again, they've got that big database of members, so you can go, okay, who am I, where am I advertising? Are they on this list? And it gives you a really good kind of signpost there. So that's a general kind of review of advertising self-regulation that we always need to keep in mind, no matter what product we're testing, and in this case, for pet care products. So what's the specific advice for pet products that's out there? So I wanted to get some information from a couple of different countries. So you can kind of think about, where you can be looking for advice, and what this particular codes are to look at. So the Advertising Standards Authority, as I mentioned, are in the UK. They're a pretty good kind of set standard if you're looking at European advertising. The EASA, which is the European Advertising Standards Alliance, kind of adopted a lot from the ASA, and a lot of countries do. So it never hurts to look at the ASA as kind of a leader in terms of advice. But some really general advice they're putting out there. You need to make sure that you don't make any health claims about your product if it's not a licensed medical product. So that's quite a common thing with pet care, is people kind of go ahead and make medical claims and they can't. If you work in any other kind of product, or if you're doing any kind of product development at the moment, you'll know this is generally a huge rule when it comes to claims. Never claim to do anything medicinal or health-wise if you've not got a medicinal product, and it's very much the same with pet care. Another one is to make sure you don't make medicinal claims for unlicensed products. So, it needs to be a licensed medicine. So it's quite an interesting example they gave, that if you said, for example, that there was a behavior improvement in horses, so, it makes the horse kind of more calm because it's got a nutrient deficiency or something like that, you're basically saying it's a medicinal product, and you need to make sure that A, it's licensed, and B, that you hold some evidence behind it. And if you do hold evidence behind it, again, if it's not licensed, you can't make the claim. So it's just an interesting thing to think about there, and a couple of links to their website there for additional advice. Also the FTC, which is the Federal Trade Commission. I don't think I've said that right off the top of my head. But they regulate adverts it's the Federal Trade Commission. There's a logo there. Great, thank you. But they are the ones that regulate advertising standards in the USA. So they are basically a federal agency. So they don't do it self-regulatory. They are federal, which is why you see a lot more kind of heavy punishments in the US generally, because it can be unlawful if you basically break their standards. But they've got some really good kind of breakdown of advice as well for products for pets in the USA if you're advertising there. So I thought they're quite helpful to share with you guys. So you're going against the FTC regulations if you're seen to be doing any of the following. So if you kind of get caught out doing any of these things. So if you're misrepresenting any dog or cat food in any, kind of aspect in terms of form, suitability. So it might be things, we say about the age for a pet. If you get that wrong, you're going to be doing a misleading advert, any nutritional benefits, and of course, medicinal. So that's all really important. You need to be really, you can't mislead about the processing methods you're using to manufacture the products. That's generally a rule for any product, but obviously specifically for dog and cat food in this case. You can't make any false statement about the competitor's quality. quite a big thing in the US. There's obviously really big competitor claims, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail. But yeah, you do see a lot of people kind of calling out other competitors and saying if they're better or not, and it can't be false. You have to hold some kind of evidence behind that. You can't make anything up about the length of time you've been in business, or anything that you own. So say you're in your own laboratory or facilities, you can't make that up. Again, this all seems really straightforward, but this all comes from, specific advice where people have obviously done this before. You can't use deceptive endorsements or testimonials, or say that you've received an award that you haven't, and you can't misrepresent the price at all of which it can be purchased. So that kind of does apply more for retailers, and again, that's quite common from many products. So I said I wanted to touch briefly on comparison claims, because it is something we see a lot with pet food as well. We do a lot of comparison products, mainly because it's a really easy way to test these kinds of products. When we're talking about claim substantiation, it's quite hard to say, if a cat or dog loves a product, but what you can definitely find out is if they like it better than another one. And I'll touch on that in my case study. So it's not just about the claim necessarily, I guess, it's about the testing of it as well. But I just wanted to kind of touch on competitive claims as well. So by the ASA, a comparison is usually to compare the quality, the price, or the performance, or the market share, essentially. It doesn't always fall into those categories, but certainly, with the test that we do, it's usually about quality, definitely. So you can make comparisons with your own product, so best selling, of your own product. We see that quite a lot. But you can also make comparisons with other competitors. Going back to your own product, it could be a new formulation, so new and improved formula is quite a common one that we do. But obviously then it can be to do with other products as well. You should always be really careful about kind of making claims that are like the best, the leading, or the cheapest, because you'd have to kind of objectively claim against the whole market. Generally, when we're looking at making claims about kind of the best product, we tend to like to word it as no better than whatever brand, it makes it sound like you're the best, but actually you're just saying that they're not better than you, and that you're on a level playing field. So it's quite a good way of wording things. But yeah, I will touch a bit more on comparison in my case study, but I just wanted to make it really clear what we're kind of talking about with comparisons there. So specific pet care regulations. So we've talked about advertising regulation. We've talked about specific advertising regulation for pet care products, but I also want to talk about other pet care regulations you should be wary of, that have got advice about claims, as well as, manufacturing it. So when we're looking at kind of certain category regulations, they cover the whole market, so what you're allowed to put in the product, but also about the claims and things like that you're allowed to say. So it's really important that you're looking at those particular regulations for the countries that you're selling your product in again. So again, I could do the whole world, but we'd be here all day, so I've just picked out some really key markets that I think you'll all be interested in. So in the UK, you've got the Food Standards Agency, who are looking at regulations for pet food. And with that, basically, I was going to say is that really helps what ingredients you're allowed to use in the pet food and what claims you can say about the nutritional benefits. So do have a look at that. I do know someone emailed in and was saying about where do I find out about the nutritional benefit claims I'm allowed to say, and what ingredients are allowed to be put in there. So that for the UK would be the FSA. You've also got the oh god, I know I'm going to say this word, veterinary medicines regulations. It's one of those words I can never say. So anything to do with veterinary medicines is regulated by the VMR in the UK. We've also got in the USA, the Food and Drug Administration also regulate everything to do with animals. So we usually think about them as people that regulate cosmetics and food for humans, but they do all animals as well. And that's everything from food to veterinary products as well. In the EU, it's very much the same as the UK. No surprise there, because we were obviously a part of the EU before. So we've kind of copied their regulations. But they've got the European Pet Food Industry Federation. So again, if you want to make food for the EU, that is where you'll find out your information about any regulations to do with food for pets. And you've also got veterinary products regulated under the EU Commission. So you can find some information there. A really important thing to note, generally in all of the countries, obviously it does depend, when looking at grooming products, so things like dog shampoo and stuff like that, that if they don't have a medical benefit, they are not a cosmetic, but they're not regulated as such either. So it's really interesting because they don't really come under any kind of blanket regulation, because obviously they need to make sure they come within the Animal Welfare Act. You can't have anything that's dangerous, but there's no kind of cosmetic regulation for pets as there is for humans, where you've got any kind of rules about the claims you're allowed to make. However, they are already always regulated by those advertising standards. So that's why I really wanted to touch on that earlier. So you can't kind of say, okay, well, I've got this dog shampoo, I'm going to say it's the silkiest soft you can ever get your dog's hair, and just put it out there, because there's no cosmetic regulation. I'm got to worry about what I'm claiming. It's still going to be a misleading claim under the eyes of the advertising standards authorities if you say that about the product. So you do need to have some kind of evidence behind your claims anyway. So talking about evidence behind claims takes me really nicely into consumer research, which is what we conduct. And it really is a great way of assessing pet products, probably compared to other types of research. So every industry is different, but in, when we're talking about pets, as I was saying, the way we review it, obviously it's incredibly subjective, because it's like, does my pet eat it, or does it like it, or do I like it? It's really about opinion, and that is what consumer research is. It's all about the consumer's perception of a product. It's their self-assessment. It's what their opinions are. We're not looking at measurements. We're not looking at kind of specific scientific instrumental studies. What we are doing is we're using science in a statistical analysis, but looking at people, evaluating people's opinions. So generally they're in-home user studies, which again, perfect for pets, because you want to send them products to use on their pets at home. We want to reflect the actual conditions of use. So again, really great for pet products. Say, for example, you have a pet toy and you want to say it's indestructible. Well, it's all very well good to put it in pressure test, but actually when a dog's given it at home, how long will it take it to destroy it, or will it destroy it? It really looks at that actual use, of the product when it's in someone's home. You can assess the efficacy of the product or compare it. Again, I will talk more about comparison, because I think it's just a really good way of testing pet products. But you can also look at products on their own. Again, if it was something like that in an indestructible toy claim, that would probably be on its own, because you don't need to compare it necessarily. But when it's something like a food preference, obviously a comparison is great. You may need additional evidence. Certainly, if we're talking about those kind of nutritional claims or something like that, you can't ask a consumer and say, would you agree with the claim that it helps your dog's heart? That would be crazy. No one can rate that. So there are some additional evidence claims there as well. But what we can do is say, we've got this nutritional benefit. We know this ingredient helps with a dog's heart, but does your dog actually like to eat it? Is it its favorite food? And that's what we'd be looking at. So some examples there on the right, things like people agree that their dog's fur is molting less. That's the kind of thing we do for a consumer. Really classic claim, I had to put in that. 8 out of 10 cats prefer, and I'm sure some of you remember which kind of food brand that was. But that's the kind of claim you can only do through consumer research. When tested against other brand leaders, how many cats preferred that brand. 96% of people agree this is the best toy their pet has ever played with, something like that. Kind of a marketing claim that would then help you sell more products in that kind of sense. But also, what are the other reasons we are going to test products? And I thought it's always important to think about for any product development, because you can do one consumer test and have lots of reasons for conducting it. It's not always just about claims substantiation. But certainly when it comes to pet products, actually a lot of people that test their pet products aren't necessarily looking to substantiate claims. They're looking to get other feedback about their product. I've seen someone's raised a hand. I forgot to say at the beginning, if you want to put in questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box. I'm going to answer questions at the end. I forgot to say that at the beginning, so I do apologize. But carrying on. So obviously, like I said, one of the reasons is claim substantiation, but really it is to do with new product development. So if there's anything you want to review that helps your product development, this is the time to think about using a consumer panel on your key consumers, whether you're thinking about the owner's feedback or the pet's feedback. This is what you're looking at testing on. And, in terms of that, so product and brand perceptions, who do you want to perceive your product? Who's your target consumer? And what are their perceptions of it before you go down that long line, an expensive line of actually producing the product and launching it and registering it everywhere? What is that feedback? So benchmark testing is huge, obviously testing against competitors, but also your own products. It could be testing suppliers, and I will touch on that in more detail. So again, things like reformulation I touched on earlier is really good. Investigating new markets, it's always a brilliant way to use consumer research. So if you're really selling a lot of products in the UK, but you want to go into the EU, into other countries, or if you're selling in the US and you want to come over to the EU or go into Asia, wherever it is, we can do that feedback at this point, even if it's not your product in particular, but the brand, the logo, the design, the colors, everything like that, we can do that review for you to make sure it's going to be a really good success when you get into those markets. Testimonials and reviews, we touched on that with the FTC earlier. So yeah, we can help gather those endorsements and things like that through consumer research, which helps us ensure that it's objectively substantiated, which is huge when you're looking at testimonials. You have to have some kind of evidence behind it, and it's got to be compliant as well with the regulations. So that's really important. Things like photos and videos, they can be a really good marketing tool to get real life consumers providing feedback through photos and videos. So that's a really good thing to get. I've kind of touched about review and packaging design, but also things like price points. That's usually really good for if you're looking at, a lot of supermarkets like to do that essentially, if they're kind of looking at reviewing a product, and a lot of supermarkets have kind of their main line, their discount line, and their luxury line. It's finding out if they're testing their luxury line, are people going to pay the luxury prices, or are they thinking it's in kind of budget brand, all that kind of thing basically. So a case study, I keep saying I'm going to do a case study, and here it is. So the reason I was kind of saying I'm going to touch on this, I'm going to touch on that, is because this case study is a really good example of a lot of things I've talked about. So it's a dry dog food comparison. It's from a leading British supermarket. And the idea is they're looking at two different dry dog foods. Their supplier is testing it for them because they want to choose which one of those dog foods they're going to use. And then that will be sold as their own brand. So this is kind of summarizing a lot of the things I've touched on. So really it's more of an assessment of which product's best, but also we can then use this data as well if they want to use it in their marketing. So it's kind of a not double-edged sword, that's a bad thing. It's kind of a win-win situation where they are able to use the product to evaluate their supplier, but also use the product for claim substantiation. So what's the study protocol for this? It was placed in the UK. They're a UK supermarket, so they wanted to get feedback from their consumers. Dual product comparison, which means we're testing two products. An even rotation product distribution, that basically means that we are sending half of the products product A first, half of the consumers product A first, half of them product B first. The first 3 days of the study, they're using one product, and then they switch. And it basically means there's no bias towards which one was which one the dog ate first or whatever, because we've had that switch around. So it's always really important to think about study design at this point to make sure that you get the best kind of data, essentially, that it's the fairest the test can be. So overall, it was just a 6-day study. We did 3 days for each dog food. That's all we really needed to be able to get feedback to see which one was the best, because you can easily over 3 days kind of see if the dog's liking it. They had to be between the ages of 1 to 5 years old because that was the appropriate age category. And they had to usually eat dry food. That's kind of just fair on any test, because if they were dogs that usually eat tinned wet food and then we ask them to use a dry, we're already kind of failing at the first hurdle if they don't like the food. So what were the results? So basically we've got this has come straight from our report. Sorry, start again. This has come straight from our report. We've got a result, kind of a table summarizing the results of the test. And we have on the left-hand side, the statement that they've kind of agreed with, or they've rated, so the claim essentially the consumers have looked at. We've got the number of people that had a satisfied response, a neutral response, and a non-satisfied response, and then the percentage of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied response. So there's only 2 questions here, but as you can see, I've got the product codes next to the question. So, we have one product code was VA137 and the other was SD268. So we're looking at both. And I want to just use 2 examples here from the report. One is about the consumer, the owner's review of the product, and the other one is about the pet. So I thought it's quite a nice example there because you can do both. So things about, was the pack easy to open and to feed your pet? What's the review on that one? Because that's what you can put out there when you're selling a product to the owner, because you're not selling it to the pet, but obviously the owner wants to know what they can get out of it, which is so good. Why should they choose your brand? But then also we've got the overall pet's overall reaction to the food as well. So yeah, basically, which one did they like the most? So what was quite interesting about these is the VA137 was the winner. No, didn't do as well about pack being easy to open and feed the pet, but the overall reaction to the pet's food was the winner, and kind of the other way around. But what's really important about a comparison test is we can't now go, okay, so 85% agreed that the overall reaction to the pet's food was the best, that's the best food, because we need to make sure there's statistical significance between those results. So on the next page, how do we look at that? So we do a paired sample t-test, which is a really lovely statistic that I don't understand. So it's lovely and built into our report, so we can just get this lifted out and we find out if it works straight away. So what was your overall reaction, your pet's overall reaction to the food? As I said, we found out that VA137 was higher, but actually the mean averages are very, very close. And we have this lovely paired sample t-test, and it tells us that there is no evidence that the samples differ. So even though it's a higher percentage, it's not enough to make a decision about the product on, especially when you can see that actually the other product did much better about the packaging, and this one did better about the overall reaction. There's just not enough data there to make a clear decision about which one is the winner, because it kind of goes either way. So it's really interesting to kind of look at. Certainly, another thing that really helps is more volunteers. So the more volunteers you have, the easier it is to look at that difference between the products. So that is what we would suggest to the client in this instance, is that we test it on more volunteers to see if we get some kind of more detailed feedback, and we can close that gap between the statistics. Bit of legislation behind it, because I've talked a lot about the codes of conduct and everything like that, but I haven't talked specifically about what that looks like. So this has come from the Advertising Standards Authority, which is where this product was being tested. So they do say that more complex comparisons, such as the comparison between the efficiency of products, which is what this was, require a large amount of technical evidence. Because if you're basically going to say this product is better than that product, you need to have a huge amount of technical evidence behind it to be able to make a claim like that. You also need to include enough information about the basis of the comparison for the consumer. So you do often see that if you do see a competitor claim, you'll see a kind of small print about what that test is. It's really important to do that, because instead of just saying we're the best, the consumer needs to see how you rated that so that they can make their decision about it as well. So I'm about to go to a question and answer, but before I do, I just want to tell you a bit more information about us, because I've talked about consumer research and why you should use consumer research, but I haven't said much about Ayton Global Research and why you should pick us. So we're an award-winning research agency. So we've won some international business awards, some family business awards. We are completely compliant with the GDPR. Of course, we have to, but we take data protection very, very seriously, and we have an ISO 27001, which audits us on that. We do have undesirable event reporting, which is made in accordance with the Cosmetic Vigilance Act, which isn't so important for pet food, but we do have specific undesirable event reporting for pets as well. So make sure that you get any information about that would be very important for your product launches. We have full product liability insurance, which again all kind of relates to that, making sure that everyone's got is kind of covered and that it's all fair. We have an ISO 9001 as well as our ISO 27101, and that is to do with quality assurance. We are a partner to Market Research Society, so we get full training about questionnaire design and study design, but also that our research is conducted ethically. You get bespoke regulatory advice. That is what I'm here for. And you also get a designated study manager. So you have one point of contact that will kind of manage your study and understand everything about you. So you get your research objectives and all of your procedures kind of conducted properly. Just a little bit of more advice, a couple of FAQs before we go to the question and answer. So generally we say about a panel size of 100 responses. That really does depend on the claim you're making and the product you're testing, but that's always a huge question that gets asked, how many responses do I need? Yes, we can discuss that, but 100 responses is a great kind of estimated figure to think about if you're thinking about doing consumer research. I've already touched on product by liability insurance. You need to make sure the samples have been safety tested or at least are safe to use. So obviously you don't necessarily get a dog food safety tested, but it has to be made in practice. And we have to have assurances that it's safe for the pets to use. You should always make sure that studies are branded. I didn't mention that necessarily, but that is a huge thing, especially if you're doing a comparison, which I mentioned earlier. We can't let the volunteers know what brands they're kind of testing because we don't want to have any bias on their results. And you always need to make sure your questionnaire design supports your claims, and we can really give you some help for that as well. So I've seen some questions coming in, so I really want to get onto the questions now. So feel free to put any questions you have in the Q&A box, and I'll see what we've got in so far, and I'll see if I can help. Okay, so I would note that owner's opinions should be stated as such and not scientific facts. E.g., the owners feel that the dog is shedding less is okay, but not dog shed less without scientific substantiation. Absolutely, I completely agree. So that's kind of what we're looking at with that claim example in particular, is 88% agree that they've noticed their dog is molting less, something like that. So yeah, you need objective scientific data for specific claims. And this is what I mentioned earlier when I said you may sometimes need additional evidence. And that's certainly something that we advise as well. So we do have partners that conduct clinical studies. And if you ever come to us with kind of a list of claims, and you're like, can we get these substantiated? We'll either reword the claims to make sure you can use consumer research, or if that's not possible, we would also suggest other types of testing. So yeah, absolutely. You can't kind of be like, this product does this without objective evidence behind it. But what you can do with consumer research is kind of be like, well, people agree with this. And again, it's a really good way to get those marketing claims, things like, the 8 out of 10 cats preferred. That's really subjective. It's an opinion. So we really have to use consumer research for that type of claim as well. But thank you. That's really helpful. And I'm sorry if I didn't touch on that earlier. I've just got something in the chat. I'll check to see if that's another question. I was just lovely. Thank you, Macon, to say congratulations. But yeah, that's all the questions I've got in there for now. I do know I had a couple of questions on email. I hope I've answered those. Please do feel free to email directly. And that goes for everyone. I will send out my contact information after this, along with the recording of the webinar. So yeah, I will send that out this afternoon. So yeah, if you have any other questions, or if you'd like to discuss a project for a product test for pets, do let me know and I'll be really happy to help. Just a couple of upcoming webinars as well, just before I kind of finish off for the day. So next week, I'll be doing a webinar about social market research and designing a study exploring current events, thinking about how we can utilize market research to understand our consumer a bit more, essentially, and find out about what their response is to current events and how you can use that to direct your marketing. We also have on the 26th, I'll be joined by Thomas Marquardt, and we will be doing this webinar on questionnaire design and the bias implications. So not just about how to design a good questionnaire, that can be a bit dry, but we'll be looking at how we can negate bias on a questionnaire and what kind of the effects are there as well. A couple of SCS things as well. So Society of Cosmetic Scientists, they have their distance learning course, which is a recognized course in the essentials of cosmetic science. And you can do that from anywhere in the world at any time. So please do feel free to have a look at their website if you're interested. We also have the IFSCC Congress in London, September 2022. Fingers crossed that will be happening in person. It's getting there. It's looking like it. And that'll be a fantastic place for us all to meet again in the industry. So please register your interest for that now as well. Thank you so much for listening today. I know it's been a real sweeping overview of pet care, but I hope it's kind of got you thinking about what kind of product tests you might like to do and things like that. And as I said, my contact information is there, but I'll be emailing it out anyway. So you can feel free to ask me any questions. Thank you so much. I'll just check no one's asked any questions before I go off. But thank you very much, and have a lovely weekend, everyone. And hopefully I'll see you next week.